Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how I turned all of this fabric and felt into a Minecraft Axolotl plush. So first off, I have my fabric piece here and all my pattern pieces that I need to cut out on the fabric. I will have this pattern available for download, so check the description for that if you're interested, but I'm just tracing the pieces onto the fabric now. There's no seam allowance in this pattern, so I prefer to trace around where the actual seam is going to be and then just leaving a little extra for seam allowance. I will be hand sewing this plush, so it's not like I need to leave a whole lot of seam for a machine to sew through. But just keep that in mind if you do download this pattern. There is no seam allowances. And here are all the pieces all laid out. I like to put them with their pattern piece and clip it together. This just keeps everything organized so I know what piece I'm working with. And now we're going to start with the felt. So this is just me checking to make sure everything will fit on the felt, but what I'm first doing is the accent color for the frills and everything. That's what I'm cutting my big pattern piece out of. So this is what I'm doing here. Don't worry with the actual pattern, it's an actual full piece. I just hadn't put that together yet. But this is the tail piece. So just cutting that out of the felt. Felt doesn't need a seam allowance, it won't fray, so don't be worried about having to add seam allowance to the felt. You shouldn't have an issue with it. And I'm just cutting out the pieces for the frills. Again, I'm cutting out the full piece using the accent color. So for this particular Minecraft Axolotl, it's the blue one with the pink accents, so I'm cutting out everything in the pink, and you'll see why once I get to the blue. Also, if you're worried about the pencil markings being on your fabric or your felt, I wasn't too concerned about it, it's not that noticeable, but you could use other fabric marking tools. And here it is with all the overlays of the blue. So now I'm just sewing the overlay to the accent pieces. I have 2 pieces of overlay for every one pink piece. And I'm just using a simple running stitch basically to stitch this all together. You could use fabric glue if you prefer that method, but I felt it was just as easy to stitch it, and I actually like having the stitch lines on it. It just shows that it's an actual handmade plush. And this will be repeated for all of the different felt pieces. Here are all of the felt pieces all sewn together, and I've just laid out the frills in their orientation that they're going to be in. This just makes it easy for me to remember which one is which. Yeah, so they're just all in their proper orientation, and now I'm taking the front headpiece and sewing the mouth onto it. So the headpiece, there are 4 pieces that are the same. One of them is going to be your front piece, one of them is going to be the back headpiece, and the other 2 will be the top and the bottom. It doesn't matter which is which, just as long as you mark which one is which for yourself so you know. So now I'm taking the back headpiece and clipping all of the frills to it in the spots marked on the pattern. And I'm making sure to clip these right sides together because we will be turning this inside out at the end. We want to make sure that our frills can go out the proper way. If you sew them how you want it to be in the end, when you turn it inside out, all your frills are going to be stuck on the inside. So that's why I'm sewing them on this way. It's a little counterintuitive, I know, if you're new to sewing, but trust me, it will work out in the end. And I'm just making sure that I sew each one on. This doesn't have to be a super secure stitch. You will be going over this again with the seam of the head, but I'm making sure it's a little more secure just in case. You could just use a basting stitch, or you could even just leave them pinned there. But I find sewing them down, this makes it less likely that they're going to shift positions. So now I'm taking the side head pieces and pinning them to the front. Again, right sides together. And just hand sewing up the seam. Again, I'm just using a simple running stitch here. If you want something more secure, you could go with a back stitch or sew it by machine. But I know that this plush isn't going to really get played with, so I'm not super concerned about it being a sturdy plush. If you're going to give this to a child, I would really suggest having more secure seams. I'm gifting this to an adult, so there's no fear there. And then I'm taking my eye pieces and pinning them on the place marked on the pattern. Sew those in, and now I'm sewing the top headpiece to the sides and the front headpiece. We're going to be making a cube here, so just sewing down those free edges, always making sure we're right sides together so that we can turn it right side out at the end. And now I'm sewing the back in place. So I sewed the bottom piece on off camera. It was the same as the top piece. The back piece we're pinning all the way around. Make sure you're going to leave a gap. So here we are, it's all together, and now with that gap we can turn it right side out, and you'll see what I mean about the frills. Because of the way we pinned them to the back piece, now when we turn this right side out, the frills are standing up properly instead of being stuck inside the plush. You could also choose to do all of this and attach the frills at this stage and just sew them onto the back. I chose to do it like this just so that any of the raw edges where it's connecting were all secured inside. Now I'm just stuffing the head with polyfill. You could use whatever you wanted to stuff the head, scrap fabric, polyfill, whatever you've got. Anything really works. And now we just close up the seam with a ladder stitch. This doesn't have to be super perfect because this is going to attach to the body, but just something to keep all the stuffing secured on the inside. And now we move on to the body. So the first thing I'm doing is attaching the legs where marked on the pattern. Again, right sides together. And I'm also going to be putting together the back. So it's a bit hard to see, but I've sandwiched the tail piece in between my two back pieces and my top of the body piece. And now we're just sewing together the little box, just like we did with the head. And now we can turn it right side out. So you can kind of see where the tail attaches. I made sure to have that split in the fabric so that I could sandwich it in between everything. And this just adds a couple extra seams, but it does make sure that the tail is nice and secure there at the back. And now for stuffing, I'm putting some pellets in the bottom of this. And the reason for putting the pellets in the bottom is just so that the plush lies nice and flat when you set it on a surface. These aren't required by any means, but it does help it to stay upright. And just stuffing the rest of the way with polyfill, or again, any stuffing you would want. And now to attach the head and the body together, I'm just doing a simple ladder stitch all the way around this seam. This is where you want your stitch to be nice and secure because you don't want your axolotl's head to fall off. So making sure this is extra secure, going around with small stitches. And if you are going to give this to a child, I would recommend maybe going around it twice in any sections where they're likely to pull on. And there we go, we have a nice finished Minecraft axolotl. You could do this with any of the colors of axolotl you wanted. I chose to do this one, but yeah, it's all put together. I hope you enjoyed. If there's any part of this process that was confusing, comment down below and I'll do my best to help out in the comments.